China is investing in strategic ports across Europe, Africa, Asia and Latin America to expand and secure its trade routes. Hello, I'm Anand Naidu in Washington, D.C., and this is The Heat. China's One Belt, One Road initiative includes a network of railways, highways, oil and gas pipelines, internet networks and maritime ports. From Pakistan to Greece, China is heavily investing in port development projects to secure access for its trade. We begin with this report from CCTV's Feng Xin in Beijing.
This is Piraeus Port, Greece's largest and the Mediterranean's third largest port. But two-thirds of its shares now belong to a Chinese company, and so does its entire operation for the next 35 years. Piraeus is just one example of the Chinese involvement in foreign ports. Since 2009, a handful of Chinese state-owned companies, mainly led by COSCO and China Merchants Group, have extended their terminal networks to more than 6 ports around the globe. Particularly noticeable are those along the maritime Silk Road. From Myanmar, Malaysia, Singapore, Sri Lanka, and Pakistan in Asia, to Egypt and Djibouti in Africa, and then to Greece, Italy, and Belgium in Europe. China is building gateways to these continents' heartlands. The purpose? To increase infrastructure links and boost trade. But Chinese investment in foreign ports has not always been smooth. Projects in Greece and Sri Lanka all had to be suspended at one time because of domestic criticisms. Opponents worry that in the long run, too much Chinese control of their domestic assets will harm their country's economy and national security as well. The supporters believe that Chinese investment will help bring more infrastructure development and job opportunities to the host countries. In November, Pakistani officials welcomed the first large shipment of Chinese goods through its port of Gwadar. This deep water port is a vital gateway of the China-Pakistan Economic Corridor, or CPAC, which encompasses roads and energy plans.
Pakistan is located at the intersection of 3 engines of growth in Asia: South Asia, China, and Central Asia. CPAC will help in integrating these regions into an economic zone, offering great opportunities for people of the region as well as investors from all over the world.
In return, the CPAC will shorten China's routes for oil and gas imports from Africa and the Middle East by thousands of kilometers. Feng Xin in Beijing.
Joining us now from Beijing is Wang Lin. She's a fellow with the CBN Research Institute, a think tank on foreign affairs, international finance and global energy. With us from Athens is George Zogopoulos. He's a lecturer at the European Institute in Nice and the founder of the website ChinaandGreece.com. From Islamabad, we're joined by Mustafa Saeed. He's the executive director of the Pakistan-China Institute. And joining us from Nairobi is Ali Khan Sachu. He's the CEO of the investment advisory firm Rich Management Limited. Thanks to all of you for joining us. Wang Lin, let me start with you. There's been something of a boom in Chinese investments in global ports. Why this big investment right now, coming at a time when there's been a bit of a slowdown in emerging economies as well as very uneven, erratic growth in advanced economies?
Yes, thank you. Actually, in my understanding, building and investing more ports globally, either by China or the other international players, will be a good thing for the world economic growth, especially in this time we don't have very good economic growth world at now, because we know that investments in more ports globally will help to improve the efficiency of global shipping and also strengthen the global trade. And further, it will improve the connectivity of the world. And in terms of China's position, China is the largest trading partner of more than 100 countries and also the second largest economy in the world. China wants to invest more ports globally by improve the efficiency of the trade and also the connectivity of the world. And with Chinese investment in the global ports, we will have a stronger economic growth in the mid and long term.
George, let's look at China's investments in Greece. China's COSCO Shipping Corporation now owns about 67% of the port of Piraeus in Greece. What's that done for the port itself and for the country's economy?
Thank you for inviting me. Yes, indeed, COSCO's investment in the port of Piraeus is critically important for both China and Greece. For China, it is important because it is part of the One Belt, One Road strategy. As far as Greece is concerned, it is important for two main reasons. The first one is that the country can show that it can practically carry out privatizations during the crisis. And secondly, it is highly important because China's investment can bring growth to the port of Piraeus. And this said, we need to say that the investment of COSCO in Piraeus should not be considered only as a transaction where the Greek state can receive a sort of amount of money, but also because it will bring more investments in Greece. COSCO, the Chinese company, is prepared to invest more in the port of Piraeus, and this is related to various sectors, including cruise, for example, logistics, and more importantly, sea prepare zones. And we have to see how the Chinese company will get on with the Greek state in order to proceed. And as a Greek citizen, I feel that the investment of China in the port of Piraeus can be a good beginning for Greece in order to attract more foreign investment and possibly get out of the crisis in the next years.
Right, Mustafa, in Pakistan, the Prime Minister there, Nawaz Sharif, he welcomed the first large shipment of Chinese goods through the renovated port of Gwadar in November. What's the significance of that for Pakistan?
Thank you, Anand, for having me. And yeah, that's a very important question because the cargo from Xinjiang to Gwadar is the first mass cargo which has arrived through the China-Pakistan economic corridor, which connects Kashgar, which is the border province of Gilgit-Baltistan in Pakistan, to ultimately to Gwadar. And that shows that the route is now operational. And this has sort of inaugurated the route and is going to now make Gwadar a functional port as it is envisioned in the China's One Belt, One Road policy, as well as the China-Pakistan Economic Corridor, which you know is the pilot project of the One Belt, One Road, and also serves as the sort of cusp of the Maritime Silk Road, as the nerve center of the Maritime Silk Road. So this is indeed, I think, a very big accomplishment for not only China and Pakistan, but for the entire region, which will benefit from the One Belt, One Road policy. And that is why the Prime Minister himself, along with all political parties and the military leadership, as well as senior officials from China, inaugurated this very symbolic milestone of the land route and then subsequently the Gwadar port becoming operational.
Ali Khan, if we look at Kenya, the port of Mombasa there, it's been cited as a good example of how Chinese investment has helped the development of infrastructure in Africa. What advantages has the development of Mombasa brought to Kenya?
Mombasa has been our main port for, since independence. It is the gateway to this East African region, not only Kenya, but Uganda, and even up to the DRC. So it's clearly, the conduit point for East Africa. And if we're going to see that huge transfer of jobs that China and a lot of economists have been talking about out of China into Africa, Mombasa surely has to play a role. So I think the Chinese investment, whilst it hasn't been, the single most investment like it has been in Gwadar and it has been in some of the other places we were mentioning, there's much more competition. Japan has played a role. The UK is playing a role as well. China, of course, financed the railway, which is a $4 billion investment, which is connecting the port to these other countries that I was talking about. But if you think about it, this is, a major geopolitical play by China, an expansion. A lot of people were talking about the pivot, basically pinning China in. The Gwadia port is one escape route. It's going to be very interesting to see how the new US regime under Donald Trump deals with this Chinese expansion and whether it's going to pursue the same path that President Obama was pursuing. But Kenya is a key part of the Chinese equation. We've seen significant investment into Kenya. Kenya is in a little bit of a mini competition with Tanzania. You will recall that President Xi Jinping's first visit to Africa, he actually visited Tanzania and made a very big promise around the Bagamoyo port, which is a small port in Tanzania. So Kenya is watching very warily to see where China will put its chips to work when it puts it in size.
Right, I want to get back to the role that Bagamoyo might play in China's investments in the future. But let me go back to Wong Lin in China. And Wong Lin, there's been a slight shift in how China's investments are being used in these ports. At one time, initially, the focus was on construction of these ports. But China is now getting involved in running these ports, in operations. We see that in Piraeus. How big a shift in strategy is that?
Yeah, and as my understanding is that China's engagement of global ports is transforming and updated. Yes, as you have mentioned that Chinese companies used to mainly involved in the construction of the domestic ports and also the global ports overseas. But now, besides construction, Chinese companies are engaging more in the investment and operation of the global ports. This is one transformation, and there are also other transformations and other new trends. That is, the first one is Chinese companies are investing, building, and operating the ports globally, not only in the South Asia, Southeast Asia, South Asia, Europe, and Africa, and even in Latin America. Chinese companies are engaging all the ports globally, almost in all the countries. And the second transformation is that Chinese companies now they are establishing more diverse partnerships, either with private partnerships in China or with the private partnership or the public partnership in the local community. Also, even in some cases, based on my studies and field work, the Chinese companies are also established a three-party cooperation with the UK partners, US partners, or French partners to develop the Africa ports or other ports in the world.
George, there was some controversy over China's investment in the port of Piraeus in Greece. How was that received in Greece itself, especially among the workers of Greece, dock workers, and among the community around Piraeus?
This is a very good question. Workers in the port are not positive towards the investment of COSCO. Nevertheless, this is not representative of what the Greek society believes. The Greek society believes that privatizations can help the Greek economy, and as long as COSCO will prove that it can give job positions to Greek citizens, then the image and the public diplomacy of the Chinese company will be further improved. What is highly important to highlight is that some of the workers in the port and some trade unions will lose some of their privileges, but this is what is happening with the private sector as long as it is developing. And I need to acknowledge that part of the poor quality of the Greek public sector in the past has been responsible for the deadlock of the Greek economy, and the investment of COSCO in Piraeus can be a good starting point in order to change the mentality, especially as far as the younger generation is concerned. Also, what is highly important for China is that it can benefit by its very good public image in Greece. Approximately 70–75% of Greek citizens believe and have a positive view about China and its investments in Greece, and this contradicts also the image of other foreign powers in the country. So as long as COSCO employs a good communication strategy and shows practically that it can contribute to Greece's growth, then I believe that both sides can be optimistic towards the future.
Mustafa, if we look at the development of the port of Gwadir, there appears to be some synergy going on here between China and Pakistan itself, because local authorities in Gwadir don't want to just develop the port. They want to turn this port into a hub for shipping, for tourism, for business, for trade. How do these two sides fit into that?
Anand, I think that it's a very organic process which is happening in Gwadar, and the mega investment which is coming as of now, I'll just name a few, is a special economic zone which will have manufacturing units with special tax holidays and tax exemptions for investors, predominantly Chinese. There's an international airport being built. There's a 600 megawatt power project, and there's a desalination plant for clean water, which is all part of CPAC, which is the China-Pakistan Economic Corridor. So it's a multi-pronged investment. It includes fisheries, which will give the local fishermen better technology, better services, better boats to go out and fish, create more jobs. And then there's going to be clean water distribution throughout the Gwadar district, not only the Gwadar port. So there's many ancillary businesses which are mushrooming from the mega investment happening in Gwadar. And the Gwadar Development Authority, which I think you're referring to as the local administrative organization, is a part of the CPAC working group, which sits across the table with the Chinese government and collectively decides together in unison of what the upcoming projects for the CPAC should be and how the existing projects can be managed better. So there's, I think both the sides are on the same page. And the Gwadar people and the people of Balochistan have pinned a lot of hopes and expectations to this investment which is coming in, because this is historically an area which is very rich in resources, in minerals, is excellent geopolitical location, economic location, but it has suffered because of lack of strong economy in Pakistan and lack of developments.
Okay, we're going to have to take a break right now. More of our conversation about China's investments in global ports right after that. Stay with us. You're watching The Heat. Welcome back to The Heat. We're discussing China's investments in international ports as part of its One Belt, One Road initiative. Let's get back to our panel right now. Let's get to Ali Khan. Ali Khan, in Kenya, Mombasa just doesn't want the port developed. It wants to become a special economic zone modeled on the Chinese cities of Shenzhen and Zhuhai. How important is China's One Belt, One Road initiative, that's its big global international development plan, say, to the development of a port like Mombasa?
It's absolutely key. If you look at the geography through the ocean and you think of yourself, you look at the Indian Ocean, and it's, in my view, an appendage of the South China Sea, you're looking at a market of nearly 3 billion people, and Mombasa surely has a role to play as a key port in addressing that market, whether it's out of Africa, whether it's into East Africa. And I think when you see it in that context, you see the importance of a port like Mombasa. Of course, the Indian Ocean was a trading zone for many centuries, and a very successful one. It was then due to the reversible escalator monsoon wind, which would bring the dhows all the way from Asia down to Maputo, and then the wind would turn around and take them back. And I think Mombasa is going to play a key role in the resurgence of the Indian Ocean economy. And I think that is inevitable. It's driven in part by what Justin Lin, who was once the World Bank chief economist, spoke about. Average per capita income in China is too high now to support low-cost manufacturing. I imagine that low-cost manufacturing ports itself into somewhere like East Africa. The Mombasa port becomes the conduit for those exports to address this market in the Indian Ocean and beyond.
Now, Wong Lin, when you look at it from China's point of view, of course, as with any investment, there's an element of risk. And let me give you two examples. For instance, there's been opposition to China's acquisitions in Piraeus, as we just heard a moment ago, in Greece. There's also been the suspension of the Colombo port development in Sri Lanka. How does China manage risks of this kind?
Yes. Actually, it's true that actually Chinese companies are the freshmen and the newcomers in terms of the engagement of overseas investment or the investment of the global ports. There are many lessons that Chinese companies are learning. And from my observation, first, Chinese companies need to establish solid and reliable local partnership. Chinese companies could not develop a port in a foreign land alone. They need to establish a partnership, and their partner should help them to know the local market, know the local politics, and know the local demands. And second, actually, both the host country and also the Chinese company, either they are investor or operator, they should establish a very pragmatic and feasible development model for the port. And there is also a demand or request for the host country that the host country should have a higher level of governance and also should have a very clear strategy about how to develop port and how to develop their country to be the hub in the region. And the third is also very important, and also mentioned to the cases that you have said. It is that Chinese companies should learn more about how to improve the local governance, how to interact with the local community, and how to improve their transparency, and also how to do better in CSR.
George, the Chinese President Xi Jinping, he visited Greece in July, and he talked about the development of the port of Piraeus. And among the things that he said was that he wants to turn this port into the biggest transshipment port for containers in the Mediterranean, something of a bridgehead where Piraeus will serve as the entry point for goods going into and out of Europe. So how important is it for Greece to position itself as China's gateway into Europe?
President Xi mainly referred to the critical geographical position of the Piraeus port, which is actually the entrance of products and commodities entering the European Union. And what is highly important to say is that the investment of China in the port of Piraeus is not a bilateral issue per se affecting the improvement of the bilateral relationship between Greece and China, but it also affects the Sino-European partnership, because commodities can arrive to the port of Piraeus, and from there they can be transported through Greece and through the Balkans into Central and Eastern Europe. China's 16 Plan 1 strategy could be part of this policy, while also the construction of a speedy speedy train service connecting Greece via the Balkans to Central and Eastern Europe can also play a critical role towards this direction. At the same time, also it is important to mention that Greece's stability is an important part for the success of China's investment, because apart from some economic problems during the crisis, Greece is the most stable country in its neighborhood, and this can be a guarantee for the success of COSCO, starting with the transaction in the Piraeus port and also developing into other areas, including trade and other investments in various sectors. China always says that the investment of COSCO in the port of Piraeus could be the most important part of its investments and its relationship with Greece. And from the moment this has started, we can be optimistic towards the future, because more sectors can be developed thanks to this investment by the Chinese company.
Mustafa, Gwadar Port is part of a $46 billion bilateral project between China and Pakistan. And in fact, Pakistan has just approved Russia's request to use the port for the export of its goods. So I want to ask you a question, something that Ali Khan alluded to at the beginning of the show, and that is, how does this change the geopolitics of the region?
Yeah, it's going to impact the geopolitics in a big way, because there's a sort of a new, as I had earlier said, a pan-regionalism emerging, in which there's a lot of interest from different countries, including Russia, including other countries, and the mega financing that China has at its disposal is also altering the financial architecture, which will subsequently affect the geopolitics. So the AIIB and the Silk Road Fund, which have been established in the past few years under President Xi Jinping's watch, have over $100 billion respectively each at their discretion. And apart from that, the projects which are being invested in are very important, not only economically for the host country in China, but also strategically, because they are connecting a lot of other countries and making the economies of the area more interdependent to each other. So I think Russia's advent into Gwadar port further strengthens the One Belt, One Road policy and the project with Central Asia, with Europe, and with South Asia, of course. And you can see that Pakistan has become a very relevant player because of this project in the region, and it has also strengthened the harmony and peaceful cooperation in this area, because each country will have an economic stake in the other's economic future, which I think will be very good for the whole area, as it's an emerging market. And the synergy which has been lying untapped for so many years and decades is finally being tapped.
Ali Khan, one quick point about something you mentioned a moment ago, and that is the development of this railway network, and Mombasa will be the starting point for this railway network. What does it do for the hinterland? I mean, this is a rich hinterland that you're talking about, the countries of Tanzania, Uganda, Rwanda. What does it do for regional development?
So first of all, China is financing and building all these railways. Not only in Kenya, they're financing a railway in Tanzania. And all these railways are interconnecting. The idea eventually is about all of the East African community, then up to DR Congo, which is incredibly rich, Rwanda. So it is an enormous investment on the same scale of the railway investment more than a century ago, the famous Lunatic Express. So we've got a lot of money that's going into our ports. We've got a lot of money going into our railways. And I think, what China is doing is interconnecting all these African countries as well in a very interesting manner. And it's going to have a very strong political effect as well. So yes, absolutely, the infrastructure spend could not have been done without China's help. It's China that's largely financed it. The World Bank and the IMF would have found these projects too big, given the country sizes, and wouldn't have taken the risk on. So it's what I call the plumbing, the plumbing of the world. And for a lot of, in Africa, we're going to feel the benefit because we're leapfrogging. We're going from a situation where we had very little to this new, much improved situation, ports more efficient, railways, the roads. But just to return to one point regarding Chinese investment, like your speaker in Beijing, I think, what happened, China initially was very much a contractor, hired to build our ports, hired to build our roads. And what you're seeing is the evolution of Chinese investment. It's moved from a contracting model to being an investor, to looking at value addition, and then thinking to itself, in order to make my investment bulletproof, we've got to affect trickle down and benefit for the community around us. And it's not just purely about propaganda. We've really got to make it happen. So it's a very interesting development. I think it's growing sophistication in the Chinese model and better tailoring to the geopolitical and political realities that Chinese investments are having to operate in, whether it's Piraeus, whether it's Mombasa, and anywhere else in the world.
Okay, and that's where we have to leave it. Thanks to all of you for joining us. That's it for this edition of The Heat. I'm Anand Naidu in Washington, D.C. Thanks for being with us.